Listen carefully, because this moment is not casual. This is not something you just clicked on. This is not just another message passing through your screen while you scroll absent-mindedly, half aware, half distracted. No, something deeper has happened here. Something intentional. Something orchestrated beyond what your logical mind can immediately grasp. There was a pause in your routine, wasn't there? A soul hesitation. A moment where your attention shifted, almost as if something within you whispered, "Stop. Look at this." You didn't plan it. You didn't search for it. And yet here you are. That is not coincidence. That is alignment. Because there are moments, rare moments, when heaven interrupts the noise of your everyday life. Moments when the unseen reaches into the scene and redirects your focus with precision. And this right now is one of those moments. You've been wondering, haven't you? Why does it feel like no matter how hard you try, certain doors just won't open? Why opportunities slip through your fingers right when they seem closest? Why relationships, careers, plans, things that felt right, suddenly collapse without warning? It didn't make sense. It still doesn't, at least not yet. And maybe you've asked yourself questions you never said out loud. Is it me? Am I doing something wrong? Why does everything feel delayed? You smiled in front of others. You kept going. You stayed strong. But deep inside there was confusion. A quiet frustration. A weight you couldn't explain. Because when doors keep closing, it doesn't just affect your plans, it touches your identity. It makes you question your worth, your timing, even your direction. But what if I told you those doors were never meant to open? What if the very thing you saw as rejection was actually divine redirection? Pause for a moment and feel that. Because something inside you is already reacting. Something deep, beyond logic, is recognizing that this message is not random. It's personal. It's precise. It's speaking directly into the questions you've been carrying in silence. You see, while you were looking at closed doors, heaven was looking at what was behind them. While you saw missed opportunities, something unseen was preventing misalignment. While you felt delayed, something eternal was preserving your timing. And right now the truth is beginning to surface. There is a reason this message found you now, not yesterday, not next week, but in this exact moment. Because you've reached a point where the confusion can finally start turning into clarity. Something is shifting. You may not fully see it yet, but you can feel it, can't you? That subtle change in your awareness. That quiet sense that something is about to be revealed. That feeling that maybe, just maybe, everything you've been through is about to make sense in a way you never expected. This is where everything begins to change. Not later. Not someday. Now. Because the truth you're about to receive will not only explain why those doors kept closing, it will prepare you for the one that is about to open. And when that door opens, it won't just feel right. It will confirm everything. So stay here. Stay present. Don't let your mind wander. Don't let distractions pull you away from this moment. Because what comes next was meant for you to hear. And missing it now would mean missing the very answer you've been searching for all along. Type "I am ready" in the comments if you feel this message is meant for you. Lesson code 1010 is now activating clarity over your life. There is something you need to hear, and you need to hear it with your spirit, not just your ears. Because what you have been calling rejection was never rejection. What you have been interpreting as loss was never truly loss. It only appeared that way because you were standing on one side of the door, unable to see what existed beyond it. You stood there, didn't you? Waiting. Hoping. believing that if you just tried a little harder, pushed a little more, stayed a little longer, that door would eventually open. You invested your time, your energy, your emotions into something that felt aligned at the time. It made sense to you. It felt right in the moment. And when it didn't work out, when it shut down without explanation, it left you standing there with questions that echoed louder than the silence. Why did it close? Why now? Why when everything seemed to be falling into place? And the most dangerous question of all began to whisper in the back of your mind, what is wrong with me? But hear this clearly, because this is where your understanding must shift. There was nothing wrong with you. The door was wrong for you. You see, what you perceived as a missed opportunity was actually a misaligned path. What looked like a breakthrough was, in truth, a distraction disguised as progress. And if that door had opened, it would not have led you into fulfillment. It would have led you into confusion, compromise, and a version of your life that was smaller than what was written for you. That is why it closed. Not because you weren't ready, but because it wasn't meant. There are things in your life that feel right simply because they are familiar. They echo patterns you have known before. They resemble what you have been conditioned to accept. And because of that familiarity, you trust them. You lean into them. You assume they belong in your future. But familiarity is not the same as alignment. And this is where many people lose their way. They chase what feels comfortable instead of what is truly assigned to them. You almost walked into something that would have drained you. You almost committed to something that would have delayed you even further. You almost attached yourself to people, places, or opportunities that would have required you to shrink in order to stay. And deep down, if you are honest with yourself, there were moments where you felt it. A slight hesitation, a quiet discomfort, a feeling you tried to ignore because you wanted the outcome so badly. You convinced yourself to overlook the signs. You told yourself it would get better once the door opened. But heaven saw what you could not. Heaven saw the conversations you were not present for, the intentions that were not spoken out loud, the consequences that were waiting further down that path. And in that moment, when everything seemed to be aligning on the surface, something greater intervened. That intervention felt like deception to you. It felt like things falling apart. But in reality, it was things falling into place. Because sometimes protection does not look like provision. Sometimes it looks like prevention. And that is the part that is hardest to accept. It is difficult to be grateful for something that did not happen. It is difficult to celebrate a door that never opened when you were so emotionally invested in what was on the other side. But now, you are being invited to see it differently. Every closed door carried a hidden message. Not one of rejection, but of redirection. Not one of denial, but of design. Each time something did not work out, it was not the end of something meant for you. It was a removal of something that was never aligned with your true path. You were not being blocked. You were being guided. You were not being overlooked. You were being preserved. You were not being delayed. You were being positioned. And once you begin to see it through that lens, something inside you starts to shift. The frustration begins to loosen its grip. The confusion starts to soften. The weight you have been carrying begins to lift, even if only slightly at first. Because now, for the first time, you are no longer asking, "Why did this happen to me?" You are beginning to ask, "What was this protecting me from?" And that question changes everything. It opens your awareness. It prepares your spirit. It aligns you with a deeper understanding that what is meant for you will not require you to force it, chase it, or lose yourself to obtain it. And more importantly, It prepares you for what is coming next. Because the same force that closed those doors is now preparing to open one that will not require confusion, compromise, or questioning your worth. And when that door opens, you will not have to wonder if it is right. You will know. Type "I trust the process" in the comments if you are ready to release what was not meant for you. Blessing Code 2020 is now aligning your path. There are things you were never meant to see, not because they were insignificant, but because they were too complex, too layered, too spiritually precise for your current perspective at the time. You are looking at events, at outcomes, at visible circumstances unfolding in front of you. But behind those visible moments, something far greater was taking place. Something strategic, something intentional, something that never made it into your awareness until now. Because while you were trying to understand why things weren't working out, there were battles being fought on your behalf that you didn't even know existed. You thought the silence meant nothing was happening. You thought the delays meant nothing was moving. But the truth is, some of the most important movements in your life were happening in complete stillness, far beyond your physical reach. Your moments when something always worked out for you. Moments when everything seemed perfectly aligned. The timing looked right. The opportunity felt right. The people involved seemed right. And then suddenly, without warning, everything shifted. Conversations changed. Decisions reversed. Doors that felt wide open just moments before quietly shut. It confused you. It frustrated you. It made you question everything. But what you didn't see was the intervention. Because not every closed door is simply a passive outcome. Some doors are actively shut. Not by coincidence, but by design. Not randomly, but deliberately. There were forces at play ensuring that certain paths would not remain open for you. Not to harm you, but to protect you. Not to delay you, but to preserve you. There were alignments being corrected behind the scenes. Situations being redirected. Outcomes being altered in ways that made no logical sense from your point of view. And because you could not see the full picture, it felt like chaos. It felt like instability. It felt like something was constantly slipping out of your grasp. But in reality, something was constantly being removed from your path before it could fully attach to your life. There were conversations that happened without your knowledge that could have affected you negatively. There were intentions hidden beneath surface-level interactions that you never fully detected. There were long-term consequences tied to certain opportunities that would have only revealed themselves after it was too late to step away easily. And so, something stepped in early. Something disrupted what seemed stable. Something interrupted what felt promising. Something caused things to fall apart before they could fully form. And the disruption, that moment you label as disappointment, was actually protection in motion. You were never abandoned in those moments. You were being guided through them. There is a difference between something not working out and something being prevented from working out. And in your case, many of the things that failed were not simply unsuccessful attempts. They were redirected outcomes. You were being kept away from environments that would have drained your energy over time. You were being separated from people who were not aligned with your growth. You were being moved out of paths that would have required you to compromise parts of yourself just to maintain them. But because you were focused on what you were losing in the moment, you could not yet see what you were being spared from in the future. And that is where the hidden battle existed. Not in what you could see, but in what you couldn't. There were layers to your journey that were being adjusted constantly. Small shifts, subtle redirections, quiet interventions that ensured you would not move too far into something that was never meant to sustain you. And each time something fell apart, it wasn't because you were moving in the wrong direction entirely. It was because you were moving too close to something that wasn't fully aligned. So the adjustment came. Sometimes gently, sometimes suddenly, but always intentionally. You may not have understood it then. You may not have agreed with it at the time. But now, as you look back, you can begin to see a pattern, a consistency in how certain things never fully worked out, no matter how much effort you put into them. That pattern was not failure. It was filtering. Filtering out what could not go where you are going. Because where you are being led next cannot hold confusion, misalignment, or unstable foundations. It requires clarity. It requires alignment. It requires something that does not need to be forced into place. And that is why the hidden battles had to happen first. Because before something new could open for you, certain things had to be quietly removed, even if you didn't understand why in the moment. But now, you are beginning to see it differently. Now, you are starting to recognize that not everything that ended was a loss. Not everything that broke apart was meant to remain. Not everything that slipped away was meant to stay. And that realization is preparing you for what comes next. Because the same unseen force that was working behind the scenes to close those doors is now preparing to reveal what was being protected for you all along. Type ISE clearly now in the comments if you are beginning to understand the hidden protection in your life. Blessing code 3030 is now activating deeper awareness within you. As this truth settles into your spirit, understand this: every revelation you receive is not meant to stop with you. It is meant to flow through you. Just like a seed planted in fertile ground, it grows, multiplies, and becomes a source of life for others who are still searching, still wandering, still waiting for clarity. When you choose to support this message through the PayPal link in the description or the QR code on your screen, you are not simply giving. You are sowing into a harvest of awakened souls. The word declares, "Give, and it shall be given unto you." And in this moment, that promise is alive, speaking directly into your life. I feel led to say this clearly. Your action right now can become someone else's breakthrough tomorrow. Do not delay what your spirit is nudging you to do. Step into this moment with intention, release your seed, and watch how heaven responds in ways you cannot yet imagine. There is something deeper woven into your story that you are only now beginning to recognize. It was never just about individual moments, isolated disappointments, or random outcomes that didn't go your way. Here was a pattern, a quiet repetition, a cycle that kept showing up in different forms, wearing different faces, but carrying the same core experience. At first, it was subtle, easy to overlook. You told yourself it was coincidence, just how life works, just bad timing. But as time went on, the similarities became harder to ignore. The same type of opportunity appearing, then disappearing. The same kind of relationship beginning with promise, then ending with confusion. The same sense of progress building, only to collapse right before it could fully stabilize. And each time it happened, it left a mark. Not just externally, but internally. It shaped the way you started to see things. It made you cautious. It made you question your instincts. It made you wonder if maybe this was just how things were always going to be for you. But what you didn't realize was that you were not trapped in a cycle by accident. You were encountering a pattern that needed to be broken. Because cycles do not continue unless something within them remains unchallenged. There was something in those repeated experiences that required your awareness, your growth, your shift in perspective. And until that shift began to happen, the pattern kept returning, not to punish you but to reveal something to you. You see, every repeated cycle carries a message. It reflects a belief, a habit, a tolerance, or an attachment that has not yet been fully examined. Until it is seen clearly, it continues to recreate itself in different situations. You may not have noticed it at first, but there were common threads running through those experiences. Moments where you ignored your intuition. Times where you accepted less than what felt right, simply because you didn't want to lose the opportunity. Situations where you stayed longer than you should have, hoping things would eventually align. You gave chances. You extended patience. You tried to make things work, even when something inside you quietly questioned whether it truly fit. And that is where the cycle found its way back in. Not because you were wrong for trying, but because you were still learning where your boundaries needed to be stronger. You were still discovering what alignment actually felt like, beyond surface-level comfort or temporary excitement. So the cycle repeated. Not to keep you stuck, but to push you toward clarity. Each closed door was not just an ending. It was a correction. A subtle but firm redirection away from something that mirrored the past, rather than supporting your future. And over time, something began to change within you. You started noticing the signs earlier. You became more aware of what didn't feel right, even if everything looked fine on the outside. You began to question things you once would have accepted without hesitation. That shift did not happen overnight. It happened through experience, through moments that forced you to pause, reflect, and reconsider what you were allowing into your life. And slowly, without you even realizing it at first, you began to break the pattern. Because breaking a cycle does not always look dramatic. It often looks like small decisions made differently. Choosing not to ignore that feeling. Choosing not to force what isn't flowing. Choosing to step back instead of pushing forward into something uncertain. It looks like awareness replacing assumption. And once that awareness begins to take hold, the cycle loses its power. The same situations may still appear, but they no longer pull you in the same way. You see them differently. You respond differently. And because of that, the outcome changes. What once would have continued now stops. What once would have repeated now ends. And that is where you are now, standing at the edge of a cycle that has finally reached its conclusion. Those doors that kept closing were not random interruptions. They were part of a larger process that was working to break something that could not come with you into what is next. Because what is ahead of you cannot be built on the same patterns that once held you back. It requires a different foundation, a clearer understanding, a stronger sense of alignment that does not rely on guesswork or hope alone. And now, because of everything you have experienced, you are no longer approaching life the same way you once did. You are more aware, more discerning, more aligned with what truly fits you, rather than what simply appears promising on the surface. That is not accidental. That is growth. That is the breaking of a cycle that once seemed unending. And because that cycle has been broken, something new now has the space to enter your life without being shaped by the same patterns that once limited you. Something that will not repeat the past. Something that will not collapse under the same conditions. Something that will finally move forward without resistance. But for that to happen, the old pattern had to end first. And now, it has. Type "the cycle ends with me" in the comments if you are ready to step fully out of old patterns. Lesson code 4040 is now sealing your breakthrough. There was a weight you carried that you never fully explained to anyone. Not because you couldn't find the words, but because even you didn't fully understand what you were feeling. It wasn't just disappointment. It wasn't just frustration. It was something deeper, something more personal. It felt like every closed door was saying something about you, about your worth, about your timing, about whether you were truly capable of stepping into the life you had envisioned for yourself. And that is what made it hurt. Because when something doesn't work out once, you can brush it off. You can call it bad timing, a simple misalignment, something temporary. But when it keeps happening, when the same kind of endings repeat themselves, it begins to feel like a pattern that is attached to you. It begins to feel like maybe you are the common factor. Maybe you are the reason things don't last. Maybe you are the reason things fall apart. That quiet thought, that subtle doubt, it didn't arrive loudly. It crept in slowly, building itself over time through repeated experiences that didn't make sense. You started to question your decisions. You replaying moments in your mind, wondering if you missed something, if you said the wrong thing, if you made the wrong move at the wrong time. You tried to analyze what could have been done differently, hoping to find a clear answer that would explain why things kept slipping away. But the truth is, you were trying to solve something that was never meant to be solved from your perspective alone. Because the confusion you felt was not just about what was happening. It was about what was being withheld from your understanding at the time. There were pieces of the picture you could not see. There were outcomes you could not predict. There were consequences you were being protected from that never reached your awareness. And because you didn't have access to that full picture, your mind filled in the gaps with self-doubt. That is what confusion does when it lingers too long. It turns unanswered questions into personal conclusion. You didn't just experience closed doors. You internalized them. You carried them as quiet evidence that something wasn't aligning within you, rather than recognizing that something wasn't aligning around you. And that misinterpretation created a deeper kind of pain. Not the pain of loss, but the pain of self-questioning. The kind that makes you hesitate before trying again. The kind that makes you hold back, even when something new begins to appear. Because part of you started to expect the same outcome. You told yourself to be careful, to not get too invested, to not assume anything will last. You tried to protect yourself by lowering your expectations, by preparing for disappointment before it even arrived. But in doing that, you also began to distance yourself from possibility. And this is where the emotional impact of those closed doors reached its deepest point. It wasn't just about what didn't work. It was about how it changed the way you approached what could. You became more guarded, more cautious, more reserved in how you allowed yourself to believe in something. And while that may have felt like protection, it was also a response to a misunderstanding. Because what happened to you was never meant to define you. It was never meant to limit your confidence or reshape your sense of worth. It was meant to redirect you. But without clarity, redirection feels like rejection. And rejection feels personal. That is why it hurt the way it did. That is why it stayed with you longer than you expected. That is why even now, there are moments where you still question whether things will truly work out differently next time. But this is where that pattern of thinking must come to an end. Because the truth you are beginning to understand now changes everything. Those doors did not close because you were not enough. They closed because they were not right. There is a difference between being unprepared and being misaligned. And for a long time, you confused the two. You thought you needed to change yourself to make things work, when in reality, you were being guided away from things that were never meant to fit you in the first place. And once you begin to separate your identity from those outcomes, something inside you starts to heal. The weight begins to lift. The questions begin to quiet down. The need to constantly analyze the past begins to fade. Because you are no longer trying to fix something within yourself that was never broken. You are simply recognizing that what you experienced was part of a process that you are now moving beyond. And as that realization settles in, your perspective shifts. You begin to approach new opportunities differently. Not with fear, but with awareness. Not with hesitation, but with clarity. Not with the expectation of failure, but with the understanding that what is truly aligned will not require you to question your place within it. That is the difference. And that is where your confidence begins to return, not from forcing belief, but from finally understanding what those experiences were really showing you all along. You were never being pushed away from something meant for you. You were being guided towards something that is. Type "I release the doubt" in the comments if you are ready to let go of what never defined you. Blessing code 5050 is now restoring your inner clarity. There is a truth that may feel difficult to accept at first, but once it settles into your spirit, it will change the way you see everything that has happened behind you. Not every door that closed was simply an ending. Some of those doors were barriers. Some of them were boundaries placed with precision. Some of them were shields standing between you and something that would have quietly unraveled your peace over time. Because protection does not always announce itself clearly. It does not always arrive in ways that feel comforting or obvious. Sometimes, protection feels like deception. Sometimes, it looks like something you wanted slipping away. Sometimes, it shows up as a plan falling apart right when you thought it was finally coming together. And in those moments, it is easy to misinterpret what is happening. You thought you were losing something valuable. You thought you were missing out on something important. You believed that what was behind that door held something meant for you. But what you could not see was what existed beyond the surface. There were environments you almost stepped into that would have slowly drained your energy. Not immediately, not in a way that was obvious at first, but gradually. Subtly. Over time, they would have required more from you than they gave back. They would have asked you to adjust, to tolerate, to compromise in ways that would have pulled you away from who you are becoming. There were people you almost aligned yourself with who appeared supportive on the surface, but carried intentions or patterns that would have created instability in your life. Not necessarily in dramatic ways, but in small, consistent ways that would have added confusion, tension, or imbalance into your daily experience. There were paths you almost committed to that would have led you further away from clarity. Paths that seemed promising at the beginning, but would have gradually revealed limitations, restrictions, or outcomes that did not match what you truly needed. And the most important part is this: you would not have recognized it immediately. Because not everything that is misaligned appears wrong at first. Some things feel right in the beginning. They make sense logically. They look like progress. They even bring temporary satisfaction. But over time, they reveal themselves to be something different than what they first appeared to be. And that is where protection stepped in. Not after the damage was done, but before it could fully take hold. You were being kept from entering situations that would have required you to constantly question yourself. Situations where you would have had to adapt to something that did not fully support your growth. Situations where you would have had to work harder just to maintain something that was never stable to begin with. That is what you were being shielded from. Not opportunity, but misalignment. Not progress, but redirection into something that would have eventually slowed you down. And because you could not see those long-term effects in the moment, it felt like something was being taken from you instead of something being kept away from you. But now, you are in a position to understand it differently. Think about the moments that didn't work out, the situations that ended unexpectedly, the plans that never fully materialized. At the time, they felt incomplete. They felt unresolved. But if you look at them now, from where you stand, you may begin to notice something. You were never fully settled in those spaces. There was always something slightly off, something that didn't feel completely aligned, even if you couldn't fully explain it at the time. And that subtle feeling was not something to ignore. It was something trying to guide you. But because you were focused on making things work, you tried to move past it. And that is where protection intervened. It stepped in where your awareness had not fully caught up yet. It closed what you might have continued to pursue. It ended what you might have tried to fix. It removed what you might have held on to longer than necessary. And in doing so, it prevented a deeper kind of loss. Not the loss of opportunity, but the loss of time, energy, and alignment. Because staying in something that is not meant for you does not just delay you. It reshapes you in ways that take time to recover from. It introduces patterns, habits, and perspectives that can carry forward into future experiences if they are not addressed. So instead of allowing that to happen, something stepped in early. And that early intervention is what you experienced as a closed door. But now, as you look back, you are beginning to understand that those moments were not interruptions. They were corrections. They were adjustments being made before something could fully take root in your life. And because those adjustments happened when they did, you are now standing in a different position. A position where you are not carrying the weight of those misaligned experiences into what comes next. A position where you have been kept clear of complications that would have made your path more difficult to navigate. A position where you are more aware of what truly fits you, not just what appears to. And that awareness is not accidental. It is the result of everything you were protected from. Because what is about to open for you cannot exist alongside the things you were kept away from. It requires clarity, stability, and alignment that would not have been possible if those earlier doors had remained open. So now, instead of questioning why those doors closed, you can begin to understand what they prevented. And in that understanding, something shifts. Gratitude replaces confusion. Clarity replaces doubt. And trust begins to take the place of uncertainty. Because you are no longer looking at the past as something that went wrong. You are seeing it as something that was carefully guided, even when it did not feel that way. And that realization is preparing you for what is coming next. I am protected in the comments if you are ready to trust what was kept away from you. Blessing code 6060 is now surrounding your path with clarity and alignment. Something has already started changing in your life. And the most important part is this. It did not begin with something loud or obvious. It did not arrive with a clear announcement or a dramatic moment that made everything instantly make sense. Instead, it began quietly, subtly, almost in a way that was easy to overlook if you were still focused on what had not worked out. Because real shifts do not always begin on the outside. They begin within you first. There has been a change in the way you think, even if you haven't fully acknowledged it yet. Situations that once pulled you in no longer have the same hold on your attention. Things that once felt urgent now feel less important. You are no longer reacting the same way you used to, and even though you may not have fully understood why, something inside you has been recalibrating. You may have noticed moments where you paused instead of immediately responding. Moments where you stepped back instead of pushing forward. Moments where you questioned something that you previously would have accepted without hesitation. Those moments were not random. They were indicators. Indicators that your awareness has shifted. There has also been a change in what you are willing to tolerate. Situations that once felt manageable now feel draining much faster. Conversations that once seemed normal now feel misaligned. You are more sensitive to what does not feel right, even if you cannot immediately explain it. That sensitivity is not a weakness. It is clarity beginning to form. Because when your awareness expands, your tolerance for misalignment decreases. You begin to recognize things earlier. You begin to feel what fits and what does not without needing extended time to figure it out. And that is one of the first signs that something new is already preparing to enter your life. There have also been subtle emotional shifts. Not constant clarity, not complete certainty, but moments where you feel a sense of calm without a clear reason. Moments where, despite everything that has not yet changed externally, something inside you feels slightly more stable than before. That calm is not accidental. It is the beginning of alignment. Because before anything changes around you, something has to stabilize within you first. You may have also experienced a growing distance from certain people, environments, or routines. Not necessarily through conflict or confrontation, but through a natural separation. Things that once felt connected no longer hold the same relevance. The conversations feel different. The energy feels different. The sense of belonging begins to shift. And even though part of you may have questioned that distance, it is another sign that something is changing. Because not everything can move forward with you into what is next. Some things naturally fall away as your direction becomes clearer. You may have also noticed that you are no longer forcing things the way you used to. You are not chasing outcomes with the same urgency. You are not trying to make things work at any cost. There is a growing understanding, even if it is still developing, that what is meant to align will not require constant effort to maintain. That understanding is part of the shift. Because the way you approach things determines what you allow into your life. And now, you are approaching things differently. You are more observant, more patient, more aware of what feels stable versus what feels temporary. And because of that, you are no longer moving toward things that only appear promising on the surface. You are beginning to move toward what actually aligns. There have also been moments of unexpected clarity. Thoughts that seem to come out of nowhere but feel accurate. Realizations about past situations that suddenly make more sense than they did before. A deeper understanding of why certain things unfolded the way they did. Those moments are not random insights. They are part of the shift taking place. Because as your perspective changes, your ability to interpret your past also changes. What once felt confusing begins to feel purposeful. What once felt like loss begins to feel like redirection. And what once felt like delay begins to feel like preparation. All of these are signs. Signs that something has already started moving, even if you have not yet seen the full result of it. Because the opening that is coming does not begin at the moment it appears. It begins long before that, through these internal shifts that prepare you to recognize it, receive it, and move into it without hesitation. And that is where you are now, in the middle of a transition that is already underway. You are not waiting for something to start. It has already started. You are simply becoming aware of it. And that awareness is what will allow you to step into what is next without repeating what has already been left behind. Type "I feel the shift" in the comments if you recognize these changes within you. Blessing code 7070 is now activating alignment in your life. What is coming next in your life is not a repetition of what you have already experienced. It is not another version of something that looks promising at the beginning but fades over time. It is not something you will have to question, force, or constantly try to fix. What is about to open is different in nature, different in structure, and different in how it will feel from the very beginning. And this is where everything you have gone through starts to make sense. Because the door that is about to open for you has been forming quietly, beyond your awareness, while you were navigating everything that seemed uncertain. It was not delayed in the way you thought. It was being developed. It was being aligned. It was being prepared in a way that required time, precision, and the removal of everything that could interfere with it once it appeared. That is why the earlier doors had to close. Because what is coming next cannot exist in the same space as what you were previously trying to hold on to. It requires a different version of you, a version that sees clearly, chooses differently, and no longer confuses temporary alignment with long-term stability. This next door will not create confusion. It will bring clarity. You will not have to question where you stand within it. You will not have to analyze every detail, wondering if something is about to fall apart. You will not feel like you are constantly trying to secure your place within it. Instead, it will feel steady, not perfect, not without effort, but stable in a way that does not require you to lose yourself just to maintain it. There will be a natural flow to it. Conversations will feel clear. Decisions will not feel forced. Progress will not feel like something you have to chase. It will move in a way that feels consistent, even if it unfolds gradually. And that consistency is what makes it different from everything that came before. Because before, you were navigating uncertainty. You were trying to make sense of things that never fully settled into place. You were adjusting yourself to fit into situations that were never designed to hold you long term. But now, you are stepping into something that has been designed with alignment in mind. Something that does not require constant adjustment. Something that meets you where you are, instead of asking you to become something else just to belong within it. And you will recognize it, not because it will be overwhelming, but because it will feel right in a way that is calm, not chaotic. There will be a sense of certainty that does not need to be explained. A quiet understanding that this is different. You may even find yourself reacting differently when it appears. Less urgency. Less fear of losing it. Less pressure to make it work at any cost. Because now, you understand that what is truly aligned does not need to be forced into place. It holds its position naturally. And this is where your preparation becomes clear. Everything you experienced before was not just about closing doors. It was about refining your ability to recognize what should open. Because without that refinement, you might have approached this next opportunity the same way you approached the others. You might have overlooked what truly mattered. You might have focused on the wrong aspects. You might have repeated patterns that would have disrupted what is now meant to be stable. But now, you are different. You see more clearly. You move more intentionally. You recognize alignment in a way you could not before. And because of that, you are ready. Ready to step into something that will not collapse under the same conditions as before. Ready to receive something that does not require constant correction. Ready to move forward without carrying the weight of what did not work in the past. This is not about chance. This is about timing meeting readiness. And that is why it is happening now. Not earlier, not later, but at the moment when you can fully recognize it for what it is. Because the door that is about to open is not just another opportunity. It is a confirmation. A confirmation that everything you experienced had a purpose. A confirmation that the delays were not empty. A confirmation that what was kept away from you made space for something that actually belongs in your life. And when you step into it, you will not feel like you are entering something uncertain. You will feel like you have finally arrived at something that makes sense. Type "I am ready" for what is opening in the comments if you feel prepared to step into this next phase. Blessing code 8080 is now unlocking aligned opportunities for you. As this new door begins to form in your life, understand this truth deeply: what opens for you is not meant to stop with you. Just as light fills a room, It is meant to reach others still standing in darkness. Every message like this becomes a seed, and every seed carries the power to transform another soul searching for clarity. When you give through the PayPal link in the description, or the QR code on your screen, you are not supporting a channel. You are watering a field of awakening hearts. The word speaks, "Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days," and this is your moment to act in faith, not hesitation. I feel this strongly. Your response right now is part of your alignment. Release your seed with intention. Step into obedience and watch how doors begin to respond to your movement. There is a part of your journey that you may have overlooked, not because it wasn't important, but because it did not feel as significant as the outcomes you were focused on. You were looking at doors opening and closing, at opportunities appearing and disappearing, at moments that felt like progress and moments that felt like setbacks. But beneath all of that, there was something even more critical shaping your path. Timing. Not just time passing, but precise timing. The kind that determines not only what enters your life, but when it enters your life. And more importantly, whether you are fully prepared to receive it when it does. Because not everything that is meant for you can arrive at any moment. Some things require preparation. Not just external preparation, but internal readiness. A level of clarity, awareness, and stability that ensures when the opportunity appears, it does not overwhelm you, confuse you, or lead you back into patterns you have already outgrown. And this is where many people misunderstand their delays. They assume that if something had come earlier, everything would have worked out better. They believe that if the door had opened sooner, they would have made the most of it. But what is often overlooked is this: receiving something at the wrong time can create more damage than never receiving it at all. Because when something arrives before you are ready, you do not engage with it from a place of clarity. You engage with it from a place of urgency, uncertainty, or incomplete understanding. You may have recognized the opportunity, but you would not have fully understood how to sustain it. You may have stepped into it, but you would have carried old patterns into a new environment. You may have received it, but you would not have been able to maintain it without repeating the same cycles that caused things to fall apart before. And that is the danger of moving too early. It is not about missing the opportunity. It is about mismanaging it once it arrives. Think about who you were at the time when some of those doors almost opened. Think about how you approached situations, how you made decisions, how you responded to uncertainty. You were still learning, still developing awareness, still discovering what alignment truly meant for you. If certain things had fully opened during that time, you would have entered them with the same mindset, the same habits, the same tolerance for things that were not fully right. And because of that, the outcome would not have been stable. It may have looked successful at first. It may have even felt like progress. But over time, the same patterns would have resurfaced. The same misalignments would have revealed themselves. And eventually, you would have found yourself in a situation that required you to either compromise further or walk away from something you had already invested deeply into. That is not a delay. That is prevention. Because timing is not just about when something becomes available. It is about when you become capable of holding it without losing yourself in the process. And that is what has been happening in your life. You were not being kept away from something meant for you. You were being kept from receiving it too early. There is a difference. One creates frustration. The other creates foundation. And now, you are standing in a different position than you were before. You have more awareness, more clarity, a stronger understanding of what fits and what does not. You are no longer approaching opportunities with the same urgency, or the same need to make everything work at any cost. You are more selective, more intentional, more aligned with what actually supports your growth rather than what simply appears promising on the surface. And that shift is what makes this moment different from the ones before. Because now, when something opens, you will not rush into it without understanding it. You will not ignore what feels off just to keep it. You will not sacrifice your stability just to maintain it. You will recognize it for what it is, and you will engage with it from a place of clarity, not confusion. That is readiness. That is timing aligning with awareness. And that is why what is coming next will not unfold the same way as what came before. Because now, you are not just receiving something. You are prepared to sustain it. You are prepared to move with it without forcing it. You are prepared to build something that does not collapse under the same conditions that once caused things to fall apart. And that is what makes this moment so important. Because the door that is about to open is not just arriving at the right time. It is arriving when you are finally ready to step into it without repeating the past. Pipe my timing is aligning in the comments if you are ready to trust the timing of your life. Blessing code 9090 is now activating divine alignment over your next steps. There is a space in your journey that feels the most uncomfortable, the most uncertain, and yet the most necessary. It is not the moment when things fall apart, and it is not the moment when everything finally comes together. It is the space in between. The waiting, the quiet stretch where nothing seems to be happening externally, even though everything is shifting internally. This is the place where your faith is not spoken loudly, but lived silently. Because it is easy to trust when things are moving. It is easy to believe when you can see progress, when doors are opening, when confirmation is visible. But what about when there is no clear sign? What about when things are still, when answers are not immediate, when clarity has not fully arrived yet? That is where alignment is tested. You have already experienced the closing of doors. You have begun to understand why they closed. You are even starting to sense that something new is forming. But there is still this gap. This space where you know something is coming, but it has not fully appeared yet. And this is where many people lose alignment. They begin to doubt the process. They start to question whether anything is actually changing. They feel the urge to go back to what is familiar, even if it was not right, simply because it feels more certain than the unknown. But you are not being asked to go backward. You are being asked to remain still. Not inactive, not passive, but steady. Because waiting is not about doing nothing. It is about not interfering with what is being prepared. There is a difference. In this space, your role is not to force outcomes. It is not to chase what has not yet opened. It is not to recreate what has already closed. Your role is to stay aligned with what you have already learned. To trust the clarity that has begun to form within you. To hold your position without trying to fill the silence with something that does not belong there. This is the test. Not whether you can move forward quickly, but whether you can remain grounded when movement has not yet become visible. Because the temptation in this phase is subtle. It does not come as something obvious. It comes as a thought, a suggestion, a quiet urge to reach back towards something that once felt familiar. To reconsider something that has already shown you why it did not work. You may find yourself thinking, maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe I should try again. Maybe I just need to approach it differently this time. But those thoughts are not clarity. They are echoes of the past trying to re-enter your present. And this is where your awareness becomes essential. Because you are no longer the same person who experienced those situations the first time. You have seen more. You have understood more. You have recognized patterns that you once overlooked. And because of that, you cannot go back without ignoring what you now know. That is why this moment requires discipline. Not external discipline, but internal steadiness. The ability to stay aligned with what is right, even when what is easy tries to pull your attention. Because the waiting is not empty. It is active in ways you cannot yet see. Things are still being arranged. Details are still being aligned. Conditions are still being prepared so that when the next door opens, it does not bring confusion with it. But if you interrupt that process by stepping back into something that has already been removed, you create unnecessary complications. You delay what is already forming. And that is what this moment is protecting you from. Not inactivity, but misdirection during the transition. Because transitions are sensitive. They require space to complete themselves. They require patience to unfold properly. And most importantly, they require trust. Trust that what you cannot yet see is still moving. Trust that what has not yet appeared is still being prepared. Trust that the silence you are experiencing is not absence, but alignment in progress. You are closer than you think, closer than you feel. But this final stretch requires you to stay where you are, without trying to rush what has its own timing. Because when it arrives, it will not need to be forced. It will meet you where you are already prepared to move forward, and you will step into it not with uncertainty, but with understanding. But until that moment arrives, your role is simple. Stay aligned. Stay aware. Stay grounded in what you now know. Because the waiting is not delaying you. It is finalizing what is meant for you. Type I remain aligned in the comments if you are committed to trusting the process without going backward. Blessing Code 1010 is now strengthening your patience and clarity. There is a moment approaching in your life that cannot be rushed, cannot be forced, and cannot be fully understood until you arrive in it. It is not just a moment of change, but a moment of realization. A moment where everything that once felt disconnected begins to connect. Where every closed door, every delay, every confusion you carried begins to align into a single, clear understanding. And when that moment arrives, it will not feel overwhelming. It will feel certain. Because clarity does not come as chaos. It comes as calm recognition. A quiet but undeniable knowing that what once seemed random was actually precise. That what once felt like loss was actually positioning. That what once looked like setbacks were steps that had to unfold in the exact way they did. You will begin to look back differently. Not with frustration, not with regret, but with awareness. You will see how each situation that did not work out removed you from something that would not have supported where you are now. You will recognize how the timing of those endings was not accidental, but necessary to prevent deeper complications. And more importantly, you will understand why it could not have happened any other way. Because if even one of those doors had remained open longer than it did, you might have committed to something that would have required you to undo it later. You might have invested more time, more energy, more of yourself into something that was never meant to sustain you, and that would have delayed you far more than any temporary setback ever did. This is what revelation does. It replaces confusion with understanding. It fills in the gaps that your mind once tried to solve on its own. It shows you that nothing was wasted, even the moments that felt like they led nowhere. Because every experience contributed to where you are now. Every ending shaped your awareness. Every delay strengthened your ability to recognize what truly aligns. And when you see it from that perspective, something inside you settles. The need to question the past begins to fade. The urge to analyze what went wrong loses its intensity. Because you are no longer trying to fix something that is already complete. You are simply seeing it for what it was. and that clarity does more than just explain the past. It prepares you for what is next. Because once you understand why things unfolded the way they did, you stop resisting the process. You stop trying to control outcomes. You stop forcing what is not aligned. Instead, you begin to move with a different kind of confidence. Not the kind that comes from certainty about the future, but the kind that comes from understanding the pattern of your own journey. You trust that what is meant to stay will stay. You trust that what needs to leave will leave at the right time. And you trust that what is coming will arrive when you are ready to receive it fully. This is the shift. From questioning to knowing. From uncertainty to clarity. From reacting to understanding. And this moment of revelation will not just be something you think about. You will feel it. It will come through a situation, a realization, a connection, or even a simple moment where everything suddenly makes sense without needing further explanation. You will recognize it immediately, because it will answer questions you have carried for longer than you realize. It will confirm what you have started to understand in pieces, and it will bring a sense of closure to everything that once felt unresolved. Not because everything will be explained in detail, but because you will no longer need it to be. You will see enough to understand, and that is all clarity requires. Because once you understand the purpose behind what you experienced, you no longer carry it the same way. It no longer feels like something unfinished. It feels complete. And from that place of completion, you are able to move forward without hesitation, without looking back, without wondering if something was missed. Because you will know that nothing was missed. Everything happened exactly as it needed to. And that understanding will not just free you from the past. It will align you fully with what is about to open. Type "I receive clarity" in the comments if you are ready to understand your journey fully. Blessing code 1111 is now activating revelation in your life. Now the moment has come where everything you have heard, everything you have felt, everything you have begun to understand must turn into something more than awareness. Because awareness alone is not the final step. Awareness is the preparation. Activation is the movement. You are no longer in the place you once were. You are not the same person who stood confused in front of closed doors, questioning what went wrong, wondering why things kept slipping away. You are not the same version of yourself who doubted your path, who tried to force what did not fit, who stayed longer than you should have just to make something work. That version of you has already shifted. And now, you are standing at the threshold of something that requires a different response. This is not the time to hesitate. This is not the time to second-guess what you already understand. This is the time to step forward with clarity, with intention, and with a level of authority that comes from knowing that you are no longer operating from confusion. Because the door that is about to open will not ask you to prove yourself. It will not require you to shrink, adjust, or overextend just to belong within it. But it will require you to show up differently. It will require you to trust what you have learned, to recognize alignment when you see it and not question it unnecessarily, to move forward without bringing old fears, old patterns, or old doubts into something that is not built on those foundations. Because if you carry the past into what is opening, you risk distorting something that was meant to be clear. And that is why this moment is called activation. Not just seeing differently, but acting differently. Not just understanding your journey, but moving forward from it without hesitation. You will be presented with an opportunity, a connection, a path, or a moment that feels different from what you have experienced before. And when it appears, there will be a choice. A choice between responding from your past or stepping into it from your present awareness. The past will try to speak. It will remind you of what didn't work before. It will suggest caution in ways that limit you rather than protect you. It will try to make you question whether this is just another version of what you have already experienced. But your awareness will speak louder. Because now, you know the difference between uncertainty and alignment. You know the difference between forcing something and allowing something to unfold naturally. You know the difference between what feels unstable and what feels steady. And that knowing is what gives you authority. Not authority over others, but authority over your own decisions, your own direction, your own willingness to step into what is right without hesitation. This is where you take ownership of your path, not by controlling everything that happens, but by choosing how you respond to what appears. You no longer chase. You no longer settle. You no longer remain in spaces that require you to question your place within them. You move forward with clarity. You move forward with trust. You move forward knowing that what is meant for you will meet you at the level you are now standing on. And that is what makes this moment different from all the ones before. Because now, you are not waiting for something to happen to you. You are ready to step into something that is happening for you. This is your activation, the point where everything shifts from understanding to movement, from reflection to duettian, from waiting to stepping forward. And once you step forward, there is no need to look back, because everything behind you has already served its purpose. Everything ahead of you is aligned with where you are now, and the door that is opening is not just another chapter. It is the continuation of something that hath been building all along, something that now, finally, you are ready to walk into fully. Type "I step forward" with authority in the comments if you are ready to embrace what is opening for you. Blessing code 1212 is now activating your next chapter. As you step into this new door, understand this deeply: your obedience is not just for your life. It is for countless others who are still waiting in confusion for the same clarity you have received. Every message you support becomes a flame that reaches another soul standing in darkness, searching for direction. When you give through the PayPal link in the description or scan the QR code on your screen, you are not donating. You are sowing into a harvest that heaven is multiplying beyond what you can see. The Lord declares, "Those who sow in faith will reap in abundance," and this is your moment to respond, not with hesitation, but with bold alignment. I feel this strongly. This is your invitation, your sacred moment to act. Release your seed now, step into obedience, and watch how heaven responds to your faith with doors you could not have opened on your own.